Good. So thank you for joining in. I hope you can see me and basically the yellow Lego figurine who's saying hello to you. On this course, General Management Practice, at the beginning of the year, we have established that in order to retain competitiveness for the future as a leader or also for organizations, which is driven by people, learning is the critical success factor for the future. There are different levels of learning. The first one, which most people associate with learning, is that they know something, that they gain abilities, which then are certified in a diploma or degree. The second level, which I mentioned to you of learning, is the ability of a person to adapt to the environment. We have all been learning, I have certainly been learning again a lot on setting up online sessions. And the third one is actually the aspect of a leader on to know, like a teacher, how other people are learning. And because of this, we spoke about the fundamental goals of this course. And I told you that at the beginning, we have started off with lots of activities around your personal focus, how you would want to become different based on this course and the activities which we're doing together, so that you're going to use these class experiences and now the online simulation, that you're developing your new mindset and your skills. Of course, you went through this loop repeatedly each time when you were doing something. For example, when you were writing your own reports and your own CVs on what is the new mindset you should actually represent. So you had to think of what is my personal focus, and then you were starting to experience around that. So this was basically the overall mindset for this goal. And I just want to recall you that at the very, very beginning, we went through this activity where I asked you what kind of leader you are, or what kind of leadership you think is actually the best one to have. And in order to get these new types of leadership, we spoke deeper about the learning loop, as I just mentioned to you, how people can resolve the Rubik Cube. Well, there are different ways of adult learning and different segments of adult learning you have to go through. And just to recall, we will start this loop repeatedly again in the second part of the course. So you will get now a concrete experience, something around the simulation game, which is the briefing of today. But you will have lots of observations and things you will have to write down into your learning blogs, maybe discuss also in your groups. And I hope that this is going to have the effect that this is an experiment which will give you a new way of behavior. So in this course, you go through this developmental loop on each session, but also now we will go through this loop in the course simulation in the game. I will try to switch briefly into the Meet to admit people. Some latecomers have arrived. Okay. Welcome for the latecomers to our Global Management Practice session. And I'm continuing where we have left off, more or less, but I'm initiating actually an invitation to personal journey. We will go to yet another virtual journey, which normally in the class session is pretty unusual. But now that you have been pushed into the virtual world in other courses, you will have to see how it is different and how it is actually similar to that, what you will experience in other courses. Remember last session, we were talking about what would be the ideal criteria to select people whom you would like to have on your team, in your group, in your work. And you have made a great list of personal characteristics, behavioral characteristics, leadership skills, and you also came up with this clever sentence that, it all depends on what the company is for, why the team has been selected, and what is the task. At that point, we mentioned, and I gave you as a homework, the Belbin team questionnaire. And in that team questionnaire, the Belbin Team Roles questionnaire, you can then find out your own profile. The theory is that there are three major categories of what kind of functions or roles individuals should play within a group. The first category are related to the thinking, the rational part of the process. The second part to the action. And the third one, let's call it people or maybe even feelings, or sometimes it's called soft factors. You have here a video link in which you can later on check the details. But in essence, these three major areas need to be covered. And these are the possible areas you can actually play. Some of the people who are the thinkers are the innovators. They call them the plant. You know, it's like a natural plant which is growing and it has different ideas of growing out of the soil. Then there are people who are monitoring the progress, the qualitative standards, and some people are specialists. Now this role, the specialist role, is actually not in the questionnaire because it's considered not really as a team role, but it's an input, an individualist contribution. However, it is necessary to use specialists also for the thinking process. But in the questionnaire, you have only 8 roles because of this one, the specialist not being included. Now, in the following slides, you will see that there are more details here in the questionnaire with the description, and I've compiled and found for you a more detailed description about the different roles which they exist. Part of your homework in the future setting in this course will be to explore your coach partner, your client, so to say, on what is his or her Belbin profile. I have been teaching these profiles for years about what are the strengths and how to handle this. And one tool which I came up with, but probably it's not that innovative and that unusual, is actually this wheel. And this is something you could do in your own teams as soon as you arrive to work with them. Fill out the Belbin questionnaire with them, as you already did, and then ask each participant to use 3 red stars or exclamation marks for the weakest function they have, 2 for the second weakest, and 1 for the third weakest in level. So it's a weighting system. And then use green stars for the strengths and the second level and the third level. And if you have 3-4 different members in this team and you would put them onto these 8 different roles, you get a profile of this team, what abilities they have. And you can see that there is actually one person here who's pretty good in this dimension, this function. However, there are several people, or maybe one person with 3 very weak and another weak. So maybe this person will know that the stress and the conflicts will emerge because he's quite good at that. Not that good, only 1 star, not 3. But the others are actually very weak at this. They don't consider this functionality as being important. In a team, this one is dangerous because nobody's good at this, but this is even worse because somebody is really poor at this leadership skill. So it can be used like a leadership audit of your team roles, and the idea is that in order to have the full swing of all the functions in your group, you need all these different inputs into a team. And if one is missing, you as a team have to set up rules and procedures to compensate for this balance. Here there is a balance, here they would say there's a balance, this is the strength of the team, and this needs to be explored. It seems to be not a disadvantage to anybody, but not a strength either. Excuse me. So now recall what I told you despite of these leadership roles. I was saying that even if you put together teams according to scientific tools like the Belbin team test, you can't create a Wolperdinger. The super team like these animals does not exist in reality, because in reality, people bring out under stress, in particular, the personal preferences, and they really want to do what they're good at, what they really are designed for by psychology or by their genes. We spoke about different forms of happiness and interests, personal interests, at the end of the session. And we have also hinted at the aspects that good leadership, what good leadership is ranging from power approach, from decision making, from having a special degree, special abilities. A latest trend in having good leadership is the aspect of creativity and happiness. So based on this idea, we will now start talking about a different global management practice for the future, which is around the question of people like you asking that they want to have a work with purpose, that they want to have a meaningful life, that they want to have experience, and they want to experience it optimally, the best experiences. They don't want to put up with boring things or things they can't resolve because they're frustrating. So this is the science and the knowledge of this professor. His name is difficult to pronounce, but it is actually pretty easy if you know a few words in English. And this is part of the show normally. So let me try to switch to this. In English, this part of the face is called the cheek. You can also think of chicken, like chick, but I prefer to use this one. So this is the cheek. And the second part of his name is like the email when you've written it and it's sent away, it's sent, and then it's me, and then it's hi. Okay, so it's, have a look again. It is cheek, sent, me, hi. It's pretty easy, and the first name is easy. It's even easier because it's just a repetition of the other one. Me, hi, cheek, sent, me, hi. Now this guy is a very particularly important person in science because he has founded a new branch of science called positive psychology. Very few people really have founded and were at the beginning of a science branch in their lives. He did, and he's the founder of something which is super trendy nowadays, is creativity and happiness studies. Fortunately for you, he is my friend and I'm associated with him, and I represent his research work and his training internationally, but also at Corvinus, which we're going to explore now. This person was born in a time in Hungary when the Red Army, the Soviet army, was bombing Budapest. And as a younger boy, he remembers that under the bombing of Budapest, he played chess with his uncle in the cellar under the bomb raids. But he then remembered as a later teenager, how come that during these horrible times, he really enjoyed certain hours whilst playing chess and not remembering the fear and the threat. Later on, when his parents were refugees in Italy, his father was a high-ranked diplomat in Fiume, and then which was part of Italy, and he was representing the Hungarian state, but now it is in Croatia, this location. But when they moved to Italy, his parents were in the Hungarian society of people who were totally depressed. There were rich people, aristocrats and diplomats who were longing for coming back to Budapest and go to the opera and have their nice houses. But of course, after the Second World War, it was impossible. His family started a little restaurant at the Trevi Fountain called the Piccolo Budapest, and he observed and he was wondering how come his family gets up in the morning with elan, makes the shopping at the market, prepares the Hungarian dishes, and in the evening they play some music, gypsy musicians, and wine drinking. So the fundamental question for you now will be, in global leadership practice, how can you create in an environment where people tend to be complaining, saying that things are boring, not interesting, how can you move yourself onto the colorful side from the dark side? This is the science which he has observed, actually the difference, and this is what he was curious about, and he started to develop theories describing this colorful world. But this is called positive psychology, and it is around the question of what is happiness in your life. Now, Csikszentmihalyi is somebody who actually created the difference between positive thinking, which are nice statements like always be happy or look on the bright side of life, versus more scientific approach of positive psychology, which is statistically hardcore, repetitable, and there are certain rules. I will teach you, I will train you with Fligby's help to reproduce ideally how people can move into this more psychologically sound way of thinking happiness and experiencing happiness, rather than just have nice statements and activities. But first, we need to make a big difference between what happiness means. And like in the old days of the ancient Greek philosophers, nowadays we also need to make the distinction between pleasure and enjoyment. Pleasure is a type of happiness which comes with eating, with doing nothing, with sleeping and sex. After a while, it becomes plateaued. One cannot sleep or eat constantly. Even money is in the category of pleasure very often, because after a while you discover that you do not earn enough. The other party, the other person gets even more. In contrast to that, there is actually enjoyment, which leads to this meaningful life. Enjoyment is a type of activity which might be very difficult or very entertaining, but it is something which is enhancing your skills. You're learning in this activity, and ultimately when people would stop you suddenly in this activity, you would say, yes, I enjoyed doing that. It was sensible. Csikszentmihalyi discovered this with a random technique. He sent out beepers like SMS at random times, and he discovered that there is a correlation between the situations when people say that they're enjoying their lives and certain external factors, which are skills and challenges. You will see this soon. Csikszentmihalyi's books have been translated into the world's most languages, and there are several books, and there are bestsellers all around the world. So I will now teach you this very practical theory, which helped me in becoming a better leadership trainer, and people report that this is actually working for them in their daily life because they know the principles now. So this person, Csikszentmihalyi, has coined a term which is called the flow, or to be in the zone. Again, it is very great for me to know somebody who has created a widely known, trendy English word. People, of course, with flow, they associate the river, the Danube, not a psychological or a feeling, psychological phenomenon or a feeling. I will tell you why this is so. So who has seen the flow? How does it look? In a normal class setting, I would show you this video. I ask you to check it later on yourself, and you will see monks in a museum who present and prepare over 2 days, probably, a sand mandala piece of art. It's completely being transformed from a plan on the desk with a very, very simple activity of rubbing 2 pieces of steel or paint, colorful paint, very monotonous task. And after 2 days, they even destroy this piece of art, and they don't look at other people watching them. They're doing this in a team. It's a perfect example of what we mean by flow, actually team flow. It is great. Now the definition, which you can then check on the movie as well, it is a mental state we're speaking about, in which a person is always active. So it is not a passivity. That's why I think it's very good for management practice, because we want to have organizations also to be active and people to be active in organizations. But during this mental state, luckily, they are very energized. People pay money so that they are energized, but during flow, they do it without money. They do it from inside, and it is focused on this particular work which they're doing at hand. And luckily for us, we discovered that during this activity, not only that they're involved, but they say, yes, I enjoyed this. This was a great type of work, and I got better at doing it. What is needed for this is to have a clarity of goal. What are the goals you need to do? In the leadership simulation game, which is to follow, we'll have a break, of course, a short one before I introduce you to the game. It's still a bit of it further ahead. But you will have to check out, do the employees really understand the goals which they have to follow in that type of work they have? That's why I repeat for you very often, the goals of this course being a meta goal, being a higher level goal of your own personal development, not in terms of knowledge necessarily only, but more importantly in developing new set of skills, leadership skills already. The second element which is necessary for flow to emerge is that you should immediately see your results. Now, in group discussions, you can see the immediate result of your contribution. When you have a simulation game, you will see immediately the feedback of your decisions you take. But in other type of activities, it's even easier to see the feedback so that you can fall into flow. For example, a painter can see immediately when they use a painting, they can immediately see with the painting where the paint goes, what the effect of the brush is, how it looks. Or musician, when they play instruments based on the fingers, if you would cut it off and they don't hear what they play, they can't get into flow, they don't enjoy this activity, they have to hear it, right? When you're running, some people are doing sports more than I do, and they can feel the wind, they can see the progress, they can check out the body, how they're doing this activity. So feedback from visual, hearing, senses, even taste sometimes when you're preparing some food, the aroma, are the key source of enjoying activities outside of the work. So within the work setting or within the management field, we have to focus very much on what are the sources of receiving feedback that the activity which we get are actually, which we're doing based on this feedback, that it is enjoyable. As a leader, you have to have lots of sources of feedback. And therefore, I'm announcing that somebody who wants to have some feedback from me in between the sessions on any aspect on their progress or activities, you can also consult with me, and I will set up a short meeting for that. But later on in your life, you will have to ask for lots of feedback to enjoy it. And as a leader, you have to create loops of feedback. So in the Fligby simulation game, each time you will take a decision, you have to think, is there any source of feedback in this decision which I can take? And could this source of feedback create flow for the characters whom I'm in charge of and whom I'm leading? The next element is getting the most complicated and the most beautiful one for me. It is the essence of flow in very often practice. It's this challenge and skills balance. Now, Csikszentmihalyi knew something which most of you know, but you have probably not made it so explicit, that the just perfect type of activities, like a course or any task, piece of music you would have to play, a tennis tournament, ideally is just perfect because it's not too hard and it's not too easy. In fact, how would you define this? Well, actually, psychologically, the just perfect we call the flow. That's why we will also call it the optimal experience. But it is between two extremes. At the one extreme is something is too difficult, too hard, too difficult, and at the other one is the boredom, too easy. So this is actually also the term to be in the zone, to be in the flow, to be in the zone. You can see it on this graph. It would be this green channel here. I use later on the white color for that. And it is not, it's bordered by this area of anxiety, which is defined that you have a high level of challenge at hand. You have to do things which are too difficult and your skills are too low for matching that. And it is bordered on the other side by boredom, because in this zone you have high level of skills and there's nothing to do and you just hang around and there is not enough level of challenge. So this is actually to be in the zone. Here I use the white one, and it is blurred on the border, and I think it gets wider the higher you are using your skills and the higher you use the challenges which you assume, the more you can actually enter new spheres and new activities of being creative. And if you're doing things which are in between every day, we would have the subjective mean. Some people are more prone and more likely to feel anxious. Some people on the everyday life are a little bit more bored. Some people are also inclined to feel apathy, that they can't help themselves, which means that they don't know of any of their own skills, and they do not know what challenge they could assume. So basically they stay in this very dark zone of, everything is bad. But most people, healthy people, are here moving around these two extremes, boredom and anxiety. And I encourage you to check out always what is the skills the person has, or what is the skills you have, and try to think of what is the challenge where you could apply these skills. Or if you come from a new challenge situation, look, here I am in the green zone. I'm very challenged. Well, let's reduce the challenge by thinking about parts of the challenge and check out which skills do I have to master that. And immediately you would move psychologically from the strong anxiety actually into something which is called worry. You will see that soon. And in more closer into this whiter average mean type of feeling. So here you can see Csikszentmihalyi. We took this photo last year on Andrássy Avenue. There is a cafe called the Flow Cafe here in Budapest. And not only it is called the Flow Cafe, but they put up his statements on the wall. So whenever you come back to Budapest or you are in Budapest, you can check it out. And it says there, flow is a mental state. Flow is being completely involved in an activity for its own sake. The ego falls away, time flies. This means that when you are actually in ego, you don't care what others are thinking about your work. You actually become maybe even selfish. You ignore the time, and you are constantly working like this guy in the background. He maybe made an appointment with somebody and is losing the time. The feeling, the time flies either very fast away, or when you're doing an activity in flow which is fast, like you would be doing a period on ice or drive very, very fast with a scooter, as I do, then you think that this was only 3 minutes or a few seconds. It felt much stronger, much longer. So the brain is emptied, the energy is depleted within seconds. So this is actually two features of being in flow, that the ego falls away and the time is changed. And as a result, you feel also a flow, like you are in charge, you're in control. Your action, your movements matter. So every action, every movement seems automatically following each other. You know exactly what to do. And when you're thinking of jazz musicians, advanced jazz musicians, they get a tune, a few chords, and then they start to play, and there are no rules, but they are improvising, and they know sort of what to play from inside. Well, this is what we would like to have you also to be able to enjoy your activities wherever you are in work. Because during a flow experience, we can now say that based on the research he did, typically people would say that they're highly concentrated, they're living in the present, they're not fearful of the past, expectations by parents, companies, afraid of the future, they feel in control, and I mentioned you these two other aspects. So ultimately, flow is actually a proven dimension to move into this happiness, and when you are happy and you enjoy what you're doing, your success follows with it. So positive psychology has proven that people are successful because of their skills, because of their achievements, and not by focusing on negative aspects like defaults and weaknesses and problems. Csikszentmihalyi actually, in his big statistical data and work, he discovered 8 mental states. I have mentioned to you so far only the flow and the apathy, but I have mentioned to you anxiety and boredom. It seems also possible that you are not so extremely excited, anxious, but you are just a little bit in the worry channel. In the flow simulation game and on the debriefing, I will ask you a little bit more of being able to discover and describe What's the difference between a person who's in anxiety and who's in worry? What is the body language of this person and the body language of this person? How do you recognize what are the words people use, for example, when they're bored or when they are actually in relaxation? Because you can see moving from boredom over to relaxation. When you increase the challenge, then people feel in control. So, for example, a typical statement by somebody in control would be, just let me do it, look here, let me show it to you, give it to me. Okay? So it is somebody who takes the control, the steering wheel, takes the decision. But somebody here on this borderline is full of his capacities and then enters into a zone where learning can happen, and they are actually doing things which are unusual. They are getting creative. Personal arousal is beyond the flow. Here in this zone, you don't have the skill anymore enough for the situation. It is actually too complicated, too unfocused. And this is the full map of the 8 feelings which Csikszentmihalyi has identified. So I mentioned to you optimal experience, and we say these mental states can happen during the day, anytime. You can move around, you can stay in the mean, but out of these 8, the flow is the optimal one, because this is what people reported. This I liked. I would like to do this activity again. I'm just waiting for the work to be over and go home and play and teach my dog or do my trainings. But it does not need necessarily to be outside of the organization. So to summarize at this point, again, the loop, this professor Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi was curious about what makes the difference between people who are happy and creative. He did a statistical research in the United States, and he came up with correlations between expressing your emotions and the circumstances. And the circumstances were that people who had a clear goal, who got feedback from the activities they did, and were in the balance, in the zone between challenges and skills. And fourth element, I forgot to mention, somehow it didn't come up, if they were focusing on the activity, so they didn't get distracted. They were not doing several things at the time, but just focus on this presentation, on this activity, and not on what else will happen later on. So these 4 inputs, goal, feedback, balance of challenge and skills, and focus, these under these circumstances, it became possible that people were describing a mental state which is now trendily called the flow, scientifically called optimal experience, and they were saying that this made them feel very energized, and they knew how to go forward. Now, flow promoting leadership is one of the theories which I had put onto this paletta or opportunities or choices last session. We spoke about what is a good leader, what is the modern leadership approach. And one of the easy statement was that basically people all want to be happy. And following this very blunt and simple statement, we can now elaborate that we have developed. I have contributed to this. We wrote the Missing Link Discovered book on this, a new research direction. It's using basically the concept of flow in the leadership, in the business world, because flow is being used in sports. We have seen a presentation briefly last session already on the tennis, the inner game of tennis. It is basically using your focus and the skills and the optimal experiences in sports. Flow is used by artists to become creative and to be productive. But also it is interesting to see that flow is used in pedagogy. Now we have moved this flow into the questions of leadership. Why? I'm selling my leadership development training with flow because we think it's actually a very interesting resource, not for individuals only, but also for the workplace. I mentioned to you that under flow, you're focused on the here and now, So if you focus on the results, it improves the performance, and therefore performance management can improve. If you're interested in measuring performance and company valuations, you can think of topics of how you could actually explore more about flow in the performance management systems. Many HR people are creating engagement systems. They want to have the people to have massage and fruits and company leisure activities and coaches. But we think, in contrast to that, there is an even easier way to create an environment in which flow becomes possible, because that will keep your employees longer. In fact, most people, I think all people, leave organizations because the management is bad, not because of the lack of certain type of perks which they offer. So developing more opportunities that people get engaged through the flow will keep their employees longer. Also, flow is actually learning. You are beyond control, you move into the zone, and you develop your skills. So being in flow is actually also the only source of company development, personal growth, because if you are not in the flow zone, you do everything by routine. Maybe you are bored, maybe you are relaxed, maybe you're in control, but you do everything the way you can. So skills and knowledge development always happens in flow. And we also think that creativity can be fostered. So mastery, being professional, how you do it better, how you get forward, is also overcome with only when you are moved into the flow. That's why I propose you as managers, and through you to companies, to create organizations in which the topic of flow is created. I had one company, an oil company, a global international energy company here, and they had a flow training for years. And unfortunately, they told me that the oil price sank. Well, this is unfortunate for them, but they said, the flow training we have to discuss. And I told them, flow is not about being happy under the times when the oil prices are high and business goes well for you. Flow is essential exactly in the moment. Exactly then is flow important, when you have stress, to reduce the stress and to know what are the skills you have organization-wise, so that you can transform and change the current routines. So on the next slide, you can see where can be flow. On this one, if you would click on it, you can get Csikszentmihalyi's short presentation. First, he thought that flow is happening only with the lucky ones, the artists, the rich people, people who are in sports, people who are musicians. But it turned out from his research that it can happen also in companies like Apple and Google and other companies. And then, in fact, it became obvious that flow can happen also anywhere. So there is no such place which has to do with technical aspects in terms of work where you cannot experience flow. For this reason, I've put up yet another link here, Jiro Dreams of Sushi. It's a movie of a Japanese person, a very old person, and he thinks he cannot die yet because he has not produced the most perfect sushi ever. He's constantly doing his sushi there in this little sushi bar, but he cannot seize the work. He cannot hand it over to his son because he's perfectionist. And his flow comes from being a perfectionist in making sushis. Can you imagine? Also, Csikszentmihalyi made an interview on the TV when his book became world famous. And they said, well, where are these people, he was asked, who are so happy? And he actually, during the lunch break, went down and got one of these people who were working in the subway, and he was making salmon bagels. So this person, he called in and he said, yeah, this person said, this is also then written in his book, he cuts the bagel, he takes the raw salmon fish, and he says, I think in my fingers I have something like an X-ray, like a radar, and I can feel the bones of the fish, so I can cut the thinnest slices. And I think I'm the best fish cutter, fish slicer in the whole world. So this is a good example to say that this is not about great business strategic plans or great performance. It can be small things which lead to happiness, and also sometimes sometimes it can be the fixing machine story is that it is sometimes dysfunctional for the organization. There is an engineer somewhere in Baltimore who's working well in the factory, and he's repairing all the machines which go broken. And then he's being asked whether he wants to get promoted to be a leader. And he says, no, because I will lose my flow. I really enjoy repairing machines. So it can also be small and interesting things. At the same time, when it comes to leadership, look at these dogs. They go home from work, standard work, and they're really angry and they complain, and it says it's always sit, stay, heel. This is what they constantly hear. Never think, be yourself, innovate. So I thought that this picture is very well expressing the problems of bad leadership in contrast to good leadership. Good leadership would understand that these dogs, these employees, so to say, in parallel, have their own DNA, their own sources of flow, and they're not being used wisely. These dogs are not necessarily designed only to be a watchdog. They have actually very funny and emotionally energizing sides which are not used by this owner. And you can imagine that these dogs are dreaming about finding a better owner and moving away as soon as the opportunity would come. So instead of this, good management is needed, not bad management. We need good leaders, people who are not killing the flow, not killing the creativity, and create meaningful life, meaningful activities. So that you should become a better owner, a better manager of your teams, of yourself, and in the Fligby simulation of the companies you're going to manage, where you will be in charge of. You can achieve this by modifying and developing the skills. So imagine after a while, when your skills are good and you get better at the skills, you actually increase the disbalance of the flow zone and you move more into the boredom. So it's a natural process. And therefore, we would suggest that if you have developed the skills of a person first, then you would have to improve also the challenge level so that the person can stay in balance. So it's quite a natural thing that the dogs, after a while that they have been doing the work, they find it very boring that they can't be themselves. They only have to just say, stay, sit, and heel. The other possibility for intervening as a manager with the flow theory is to understand that people who have fear, resistance, where the challenge increases in any new project or new activity, they have been over-challenged. They moved into anxiety because they don't have the requisite skills. So certain characters in the game you will discover are in anxiety because they're over-challenged, and you would have to think of redressing the flow channel balance by developing their skills. What is it that they can actually do based on their skills? Maybe the challenge needs to be reduced, or if the challenge must stay, what skills you have to develop, and what increases, what trainings, what type of decisions would help them in finding the zone again. So you see that getting into the flow zone is a dynamic process, because once you are in this process, you have to find the balance between what? Between skills and challenges. Imagine we are at point A, a session which goes easily and goes well in your class. And the next few days it continues, or the weeks, and the class is always the same. After a while, the activity becomes too easy for you. Why? Because the challenge level has remained the same height, but your skills have developed. So what then happens is that you would increase the challenge level so that you re-enter the zone, but it can happen that the challenge is a little bit too hard, and therefore you move into the anxiety border. So then you need to develop your skills again to get back into this flow zone, into the balance that you enjoy the activity. And then again, unexpected changes come, like we had a few weeks ago. And maybe you are thinking, or I was thinking as a teacher, oh my God, teaching everything online, that's way too hard. But then when we started to develop the skills and I was restructuring the course, we moved back into the flow zone. People are making money with this process, and you can also think about that. Where is it, or how could you make money with this? I give you one example, which is Angry Birds or any freemium type of game. The Angry Bird, which was one of the first one which ran on Chrome for home players, was very easily to enjoy because it was colorful, very easy to navigate with a mouse, and people were enjoying the flow. After scene number one, after a while, it became boring. So when the system noticed that you're doing the activities pretty well, it actually moves you into this zone somewhere here in between, maybe scene D, and that's level 2 of the game. So you have more challenges. The pigs cannot be killed so easily by the birds because they live in stone houses and not in wooden sheds. And then you discover that you have to shoot differently at different points of the stone house so that it collapses rather than from the side, rather than from the top. So you're again enjoying the game. And then after a while, suddenly a few minutes later on, scene level 3 enters, and then there are birds flying over your head, which complicate your task as a flying bird, because you clash with these other birds. And therefore, after a while, you learn this, you develop your skills, and then you're again in the flow zone. And you know what happens at point G very often in the freemium systems? You have been moving around the flow zone to higher level and level A, then C, then G. At this point, they say, you can actually increase the challenge, but you have to pay for that. So motivation is given, and they use it actually to generate income. You could also think of it, how can you create this motivation to generate interest in your team, in your activities as a leader? I hope you will come back on this chart in a year's time, in 2 years' time, and rethink it constantly, because finding this balance of challenges is a gradual process, and people under stress, as team leader, they tend to forget it, or employees, when they feel bored, they also tend to forget it. At some company trainings, I asked people why they joined my course, and they said, well, it was offered for free, but I remember that in the other company, I was so bored, there were no trainings, and I took on this challenge immediately myself. I was here, everything was easy, and I want to get into flow, so whatever this training which you offer here will be, I'm sure it will have some challenges, and it will move me out of the boredom. I left my previous company because of this. Now I know this, that there is this need to take on a challenge. I came for you for this session into the training. Okay, I hope you are all back and you enjoyed the mental break to resume our class and broadcast. I have sent out quick questions. I hope that Petter, you are here. Could you please repeat your written question, because it's of general interest, and then I will also ask Tafik later on to do so.
Sure. Can you hear me well?
Yes, super.
So what I was thinking about was the mood map, and how I think it's easy to think about examples of all those 8 different points of mood in different situations. And I mean, skill is something that you just need to learn new things. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but I think it's less obvious how you can always regulate the level of challenge if it's for example exposed or if you face a challenge due for some external reasons, for example. So what are the more concrete strategies you could use on an individual and organization level to have the optimal level of strategy or a challenge?
So first of all, when you use this first dimension, you mentioned skills. There are different categories of skills. I typically use easy types of flow, which people can understand, to understand certain types. For example, when you play music, it is the technical skills you need for playing an instrument, and there are different levels of playing the instrument. The challenge would be the type of music you would play, first alone, and then maybe in a band, or advanced pieces and more difficult pieces. The second category of skills are more leadership related, and this is what you will now experience in the simulation, that you need to apply and understand your own skills to leadership challenges. So the first answer about the skills is that there are different types of skills, and some skills you have already to master any work-related situation you could think of, but certain others you don't have yet. And the second category, I would call them leadership skills. And in this simulation game, you need to discover also what kind of skills, management and strategic and technical skills other people have in your team. There will be different characters, and this is what we will also discuss in after the first loop of the gameplay during the debriefing. So what are the skills of Jan and of Rebecca and Chris and so on? So you will get a feeling for what it means to have skills and what skills are needed for doing the work within the simulated story. The similar then is applicable for challenges. It is pretty abstract to think of challenges maybe for you now, and this is exactly why this game has been designed, so that you can go through this repeatedly, and after the second game round you will have even a better understanding also of the challenges. Maybe I diverted a little bit from your question. Can you repeat it so that I'm sure that I gave you a useful answer?
Yeah, I think it partly answered the question, but I was also thinking about it more from an everyday perspective outside of the Fligby simulation. So what are some of the concrete ways or actions you could do to regulate the level of challenge to be in your flow state?
Okay, for yourself, the notion of challenge is actually very useful, because you need to catch yourself by your hair, like Münchhausen, when you feel an anxiety. I'll give you an example how it can work. In my case, it did work after I got to know this concept. I was teaching with Fligby somewhere in South Africa, in Bloemfontein, and in that country they have university campus with a big fence around it. And I walked to the entrance according to Google Maps, and they told me, you can't enter here. It was summer, it was warm, I was sweating. And they said, I have to walk around because that's the entrance for pedestrians. Here's only with cars. I said, oh my God, I will be late. For a German, Hungarian, well, for a German, horrible. It was warm. It was the first time I was there, and big distance. And then I realized I'm in anxiety. Oh, the challenge is too high. I was thinking, what skills do I have? Can I walk? Yes. Do I do sports? Occasionally, yes, I do. Will it be actually a challenge which is impossible to overcome? No, it will not be. But then I thought of the other dimension. What happens if I'm 20 minutes late to a meeting? I mean, people will start maybe call me, but it will not be a disaster. It's not the train which is leaving. So I was readjusting the level of challenge on myself, knowing that actually I'm not in anxiety. I moved myself within seconds into the zone of worry. Simply, I reduced the awareness through my awareness, the challenge. What happened then is, whilst I was returning to the main road, the dean came with her car. She noticed me because I was basically the only white person walking on the street immediately. And she asked me, Zoltan, what are you doing here? And I told her, well, I'm in worry that I will be late for the meeting. And then she said, get into the car and we'll enter together through the gate. So it is an art. It is the part of the training, the learning you get in this course, in this simulation, to get a better feeling for what it is that challenge is of others by exercising in a safe world of simulations. An intellectual task later on in your company situation, Petter, would be to describe what are what is the subjective challenge you experience with your team? I did this often with executive MBAs, and what is a challenge for one person is not a challenge for another one. So it's highly subjective. So for example, one student told me it was a challenge for her to get from Vienna to Budapest on the executive program. And that person next to her said, no, I came here from China. It was not a challenge at all, far more distant and far more unique, but it wasn't a challenge. So challenge is always subjective, and it depends on your personal subjective or the team's understanding of what makes it the complication. For the other word for challenge you could use is the word called complexity. And for skills, it is the word called integration. The ability to put together an answer, a solution, we can also call a skill. And for the other dimension, for the challenge, it is complexity. So if you overcomplicate life or a situation, then the challenges are high. And if you think life is super easy, there is no challenge, then the complexity of your life and your thinking is pretty low.
So as I understand it, I heard two different strategies. One would be to basically lower expectations, and the other would be to ask for help. Did I get that right?
Yes. For ask for help is to lower expectation, to rationalize the challenge, and to ask for help. Very good point. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Tafik, what was your question, please?
Hello. So I was asking, when you are dealing with someone, for example, you mentioned someone who repairs machines or repair food, and you want to introduce this flow process. So is the goal to make this exact function a flow process, or to discover what are their flow activities?
Exactly, the second one. So we are not talking here financial flow or information flow or process flow, but we talk of a process as a leader, so that you discover who is good at what type of activities would fit the person best. So it is not the arrangement of activities only and then put anybody there. It is actually the leadership skill of seeing who would be needed for what type. Think of the dogs I had told you. Some dogs are good hunting dogs. Again, other dogs are good shepherd dogs, and third dogs are good for, just sitting in the room and do nothing. So the process would not be to have the same process of efficiency for all the dogs you have, all the employees, but it is to have an eye, an ability to understand who would be able to do what. If you think back of the slide I had with these animals, also in the team meeting, here, this one here, can you see these animals? Yes? Tafik, can you see this?
Yes. Yes.
So the idea here is that they are actually they are super energized. Look at this frog, how big the energy is on this picture. You can see this little gazelle is happy in being in this role. Very energized person, very energized, very concentrating on the here and now. It is the ability to use the energy of these people so that they are enjoying the work, that they do the best they can. He takes perfect notes. He has a perfect strategic oversight on what's going on. Is to integrate these and not to say you go away and you go away because you don't do exactly the same what this person is doing and that person is doing. So based on your question, which was, should we have a process of flow for happiness? Let me go back here. Yes. The way you put it was the question. The idea of flow in a company is to make a job function a flow process. No, to make employees enabled to get their own experience, their own learning, their own motivation in the activities the company can offer them.
I see.
Now, this is super difficult, and this is the beauty of being a leader, because it sounds that you make everybody happy, and then there is no money left in the company. And this is the challenge for you as a leader. You also have to think of, in addition to all this, how do I get the profitability right? How do I get the individuals into these activities they're good at? And how do I create a team atmosphere in which everybody is actually on board? Because you don't work with individuals, you work normally always in a team. So for me as a class teacher, the parallel would be, instead of money, there is time, which I have to follow. The individuals in the group 45 or 44 whom I try to catch so that they do whatever they're good at, but at the same time, the whole group should stay together as a class. And in addition to these financial, group, individual, and group dimensions, Csikszentmihalyi also thinks that any organization should create social value as well. We call it sustainability, meaningful activities. We're using human resources. You'll use your time for activities in an organization. And if these are not good for society, he claims it's not a good business. And I will speak about this. You can see also the book here in the background, a little bit more about that now. Is this understandable, Tafik, for you too? Did I give you a good answer?
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
So let me then go a little bit further then.
Sorry, can I have a question?
Yes, please.
It's regarding Peter's question.
Yes.
So you discussed that one way to maintain the optimal level of challenge of the re-evaluate or reassess the challenge. Can it be also an approach to break a big challenge, break down into smaller tasks? So I think that's what, for example, professional sportlers do. So they don't focusing on the Olympics because it's a lot of pressure and a pretty huge task, but break it down into small tasks. Okay, I have to do this training this week. I will have a smaller competition next month, and build it up.
Exactly. In Peter's answer, the second part is you ask for help. You already broke it down into smaller units so that you can ask for help. By saying that in Peter's answers, number one is to reduce the challenge. It is through the process also of breaking it down into manageable units. Correct. Good point. And in the game, in the simulation, you will discover that some people are over-challenged, and it will be your task to reduce the challenge by breaking down the complexity into smaller units. Good. Who were you? What I did not see, or who was speaking?
Sorry, I was Mate.
Mate, good, thank you.
Thank you too.
Okay, so now to this. In order to exercise all these things, which we spoke about, is this flow is good business for you? Let me remove this. So flow is good business for you. Fligby is an acronym for these words. We have created based on the notion of Csikszentmihalyi's flow, the psychology of optimal experience between anxiety and boredom, but also more importantly based on his other global bestseller book, which is called Good Business, in which he's exploring how business leaders in the United States of global companies have used the principles of flow in order to build organizations, companies which were profitable, creative, and good for society. And for you means that it is accessible. So far, you would be able to read the books and listen to some theories, maybe would do some mini exercises, but you will be able to exercise these principles in something which is called a serious game. So you can click later on to my hyperlink here, an explanation on how the serious game was created. But a serious game is a new type of category into which Fligby belongs. It is actually a combination of three different areas. The first area, which you will benefit of, is the theory. So in the Fligby, there will be challenge for you to understand these basic principles of challenge and skills balance, of giving feedback, of setting the goals, of letting people allowed to focus on the activities. So all the things I told you, you need to apply now in the simulated story in the serious game. Also in Fligby, there is more learning happening because you will be allowed and requested to explore at your pace in the game the library. I will show you where the library is. And the library is a dynamic learning process because some topics are relevant when you enter a company, when you want to set a strategy, build a team. And some topics are relevant later when the conflicts come or when you need to make evaluations of their work over the period that you've been managing. So this is one feature, which is a big feature, making a big difference to gamification, because gamification normally has nothing to teach you. It just makes the process of data collection, of waiting, or of any type of process a little bit more enjoyable. Here, you will learn something in terms not only of skills, like human skills, but also of value in terms of intellectual principles, what makes a good leader. Second feature of Fligby as a serious game, it is game. You will see each other how you do progress. I have put 1 or 2 persons into the group who are observing this process, but you will be competing against each other. You will receive trophies when you take good decisions, and ultimately you should win the Spirit of the Wine Award, which is a great thing. This is only for the really good leaders, so there's a competition. And I also think that it is highly enjoyable. Most people say that after the game, they have experienced the flow, they have not been able to stop it after a while, and it was really like a good game. It's an individual game, so in contrast to all the other simulations you have seen probably in other courses, and the ones we had on my course, one, the second we couldn't have, where you play in groups, this one you would play individually, so that has a big difference. And one difference is that you will see that your decisions, what consequences they have. And it will be like in a flight simulator. You will feel immediately in the game the results of your consequences. There are not 2 rounds or 3 rounds of the game like in the previous one, where you see the results of the consequences of your decisions after a few minutes, but there will be 150 small decisions which you have to take between 2 options, 3 options, which are given to you. But later on, you can try out more things than once. So you will be able to replay the game, and you can try out and see how the game would have reacted, how you would be as a leader if you try out a different type of personality. And we will also put you into a very unusual situation, because you will become a general manager, which normally you're probably not going to do for a few years now. The third aspect of Fligby as a serious game is that it runs in the cloud. It's a simulation game, and it has the advantage that we will be able to replay it. So after next week's debriefing number 1, you will be asked to replay the game and experience deeper for yourself how you could actually manage the people. So in the first round, it is very important that you play it according to your best abilities, who you are. And in the second game, you can actually set yourself a different target. You can improve, you can focus on certain elements, which I will explain on the second, in a week's time on the debriefing session. But in the second game, you could then also say, I want to be a really nice boy, or really nice or really mean girl. I will be firing everybody, and I will be actually be very radical, very different to your normal personality. So this in the second game you can do, because it's a simulation and you can repeat it. The second big advantage of a simulation is that we will observe, the system will observe your decisions, and based on your decisions, you will see your leadership profile. This is something which we're going to talk about also in a week's time when we see your results. At the moment, I ask you to focus first on being yourself and doing the game as you can do it. Now, I would like, therefore, to take you to yet another journey. So here's the beginning of the journey. Guys, I would invite you to California for a tour, and as a business learning tour. Which industries should we select to visit in order to learn something really competitive and modern? I ask you to write in the chat box some of the industries. What do you associate with California, where we should go in order to get the best global management practices? So which industries are cutting edge for us in California? I see the tech industry, Silicon Valley Tech. Any others? Movie production, Hollywood, thanks. Winery, Xian Zhao Wai Winery. Solar energy, renewable energies. Entertainment. Chip industry. Well, thank you. Yes. If I resume here, in this journey you will take to motivate you, we have put together actually the best of these industries most of you have mentioned, not the solar one, but it will be actually located in the wine industry. You will experience life of working in one of the famous products, which is in the Napa Valley wine, and it will be a movie. You will play a video game based movie-based simulation, and it's running actually, as you can expect now, from the cloud, from the internet. Interestingly, for some of you, the wine industry in California was founded by Mr. Ágoston Haraszti, a nobleman of Hungary, who was an entrepreneur. First, he became sheriff of San Diego, and he discovered that the soil in that area of California, in certain areas, is very similar to the wine region in Tokaj in Hungary. And then he got the first grapes plants from Tokaj into California. Hollywood, as a big entrepreneurial and booming area in the 1920s and 30s, was full with Hungarian emigres. And many of the studios, for example, Paramount Pictures or Fox News Channel, were founded by people of Hungarian origin, emigres. And Intel, the chip industry, which was mentioned, was also really grown and led by another business guru, Andy Graf, whose parents left Hungary, and that is also related to the story. Now you will enter the Turul Winery in California. This is going to be the location of your journey. In this Turul Winery location, you will discover your leadership skills and the challenges. And hopefully you will also experience your own flow as a leader. The Turul Winery Company was founded in 1931 by yet another immigrant, Laszlo Turul, and it's a family business. So there is Bob Turul, the owner, who thinks that the company should continue. There are family members also working at the company, and it is of medium size, so it is not that simple to locate the strategy. It is not a global player, but it's not a little company which is only doing it out of hobby and for the local people as a family business, but they have a number of employees and they have professional functions. And they have had actually so far a strategy of a niche player, and they have built also the strategy around the Hungarian Tokaj wine, dessert wines. If ever you come back to Budapest or Hungary and you've not been in the wine regions, you should do that. And I also would recommend that for entertaining purposes that you might want to have a good bottle of wine during the gameplay, because very often you might think, oh my God, why don't I have wine here at home? They speak of this constantly. Now, what makes the wine industry challenging to manage from a business perspective? First one is the weather. Actually, we think with CEMS that this is super complex because you can't hedge for the weather. You can hedge for the oil price, for exchange rates. You can make more predictions on how the business might be in 2 weeks' time as of now, here in Hungary and other countries. But the weather in 2 weeks' time, or how will be the harvest in half a year's time, oh my God, very difficult. So it is actually one of the industries where teamwork and flexibility and creativity is super important. If you think about the operations which you have to do, it is related to the weather, but also the management issues are questionable. Should you produce lots of wine or quality wine, or should you sell it to supermarkets? Should you have a brand? If the brand there is for you as a strategy, how do you develop the brand? Can you develop the brand with marketing tools in advertising, or is it better to degustation, to taste people, make people taste the wine? If they taste the wine, should it be on the premises? But people go out to taste wine in the evening after work. So all these different type of questions. What type of people you need for degustation and for selling the wine internationally? What are the skills the people will need, or what skills you have in the company at the moment, and what challenges can you actually take on in the new strategy? And the real challenges you will experience in the game are also related to, unfortunately or fortunately, to people. So you will have to understand in the game, in the story, in the movie, every character's situation and mental state in this 8 different possible mental states. You will get some support for that. There will be something which we call the flow radar, and each time you take a decision, or any time you can click on it like a management information system, it will open and it will show you all the characters under your management and where they are. But of course the goal is clear. Everybody get into flow by your help, by your management decisions. They should be up here in this zone of high skills they have, and the challenge which they do, the work they do should be matched by the high skills. So this is the challenge of the game, is to understand these people. These will be your management team. I will show this to you also in the game soon. But there is a Bob to rule, the owner. There is somebody who's in charge for making the wine quality. He's been there for 20 years. There is somebody in making the wine production. He's cutting the grapes, producing the agricultural aspects of it, and also then the production, the bottling. Then there is somebody who's in charge of selling the wine to the market. Then there is somebody, Jen, she's your executive assistant, back office managers, doing all the bills, organizing your time schedule. Then there is somebody who's doing, Larry, he's an assistant. He's working for both Chris and Alex at the moment. He belongs to the family, and probably he's Bob's grandson, and probably he should take over the management in a few years' time. He's now in his early 20s, and he's getting, with his wife, a child. So he's helping out these 2 people. Then there's yet another nephew working. He's doing the evening, the PR activities and the events. And then there's a lady during the day, Ellen McMason. She's doing the hospitality room, and she's around for 25 years in this company. And you are now the new general manager, called in by Bob, because all these people need a leader. And the predecessor, called James, he left the company. He'd made up his mind, and he said, oh, we got a different wine company to work for. So he said goodbye. And for one season, it's going to be early March. You called in, and your job is to turn around the company, make a good strategy, make business, make money, and move people into flow and create a great team. So like any manager would have to do, using the skills. This is how the flow radar looks. Later on you will see it, that when you click on it on a person, if you would click now on apathy, it would come out who is the person called. In apathy, it's Alex. Ideally, you're supposed to discover this yourself. This is why we have actors, and you should see the body language, the attitude, and if you are not sure what is the mental state of this person, you can then go into this flow radar, into this management system and check, I thought that this guy is just relaxed, actually he's in apathy. What could be his problem? How can I move him out of the zone? Which skills do I need to develop for him, or what kind of challenge he actually needs to be moved out of this? This instrument here then shows you the group level atmosphere. 16% is very lousy atmosphere. People don't like each other. They hate each other. There will be lots of arguments. And also the profitability when you take over should improve under your time. Over time, the profits should go up. It's not a financial simulation as you have seen it before, but we also have made into the system the financial aspects of your decisions having an impact. So the aim of the simulation is threefold, and yet again, it's the same always. First, it is to make the right managerial decisions, but it is the complexity you put into the right managerial decisions, your understanding of what is the right managerial decision, and this you need to play in the first round, and maybe in the second round, you will take better decisions because you have a better understanding what is the right managerial decision. Second, more concretely, because this is a flow simulation game, flow leadership game is to move people into the flow. It's not a financial optimization, it's not a group process optimization, but mostly focus on the individuals first. And ultimately, to entertain yourself and to win the game and to have the great ultimate called epic win in front of your eyes. The great thing is to win the Spirit of the Wine Award. It will be given by the end of the season in November, I believe, or in fall, certainly after the harvest, to the best managers in the region. Under the slides, which I'm going to share all of them after this session on the shared slides, you can see the organizational chart of the game. Now, if you want to find out more about the game and the background, I will show you the game I've promised. I will show you soon, but there are several interfaces where you can find out more about the company. The first one will be within the game, which you already began, and on the login screen, which is called the dashboard, you can see here that there is a two-rule drive and information about the wine company. So think of it like a case study, an interactive case study where you can also read about the company background. You can also find out more information. You should find out more on the web later on when you're in the system. And the third one is, once you have made job interviews with people in the scene number 3, you can also go into the library and switch from reading materials, which are here, also onto the people in the personal files. And then you can see information available to you, like in an HR CV, once you have made the interviews. Before that, it's empty because you don't know the people. But then when you made the interviews, based on the questions you have asked, you will see a little bit more about them so that you can check back if you're a bit unsure. So I will now switch the screen to the Fligby game. And I mentioned to you that most of you, actually almost all of you, but not all of you, have managed to get into the system. If you have not managed to do that, it could be that you need to go to this settings and you have to enable the Flash Player. The Flash Player is a technology which makes you experience and run the game on it, but it needs to be enabled. And if you have difficulties with enabling the Flash Player, you see some things have reloaded now for me. If you have difficulties, there is the Fligby YouTube channel. And in the Fligby YouTube channel, there is a playlist which is called Technical Support, and that would give you instructions how to update your Flash players in different browsers and systems. I also strongly recommend to check out all the other videos because they're qualitative interviews with Csikszentmihalyi about flow, and you can enjoy them. They're not too long. So back to the game. Once you're logged in the game, you will click on play the game. I will go into demonstrate game because this is my interface. So since most of you have been in the game already, I'm more confident for the scene 1 that you have managed to do that. But you will discover that on the game, there here on the left side, little flow trophies will appear. These are your bonus points, so to say, of having been a good manager of the day. This will hopefully keep you motivated, and you can see also when you log out of the game how many bonus points you have and how you have made progress. Now here is the virtual time. It is the 1st of March, 10:43, and this time will progress according to the story. Sometimes it is the same day, within a few minutes later on. Sometimes you will see scenes in a month's time and 2 months' time. So it's like in a movie. And you have also all the settings here. Out of these, here with the settings, this one here, which is deactivated for me, enables you to reset the game. And I'm mentioning this to you that in case you are not happy or you want to revisit the first scene, because maybe you did it already almost 2 weeks ago, you can restart the scene to scene number 1 at the beginning, or restart the whole game to scene as well. And I strongly recommend it that you start with a fresh idea, and the introductions of the people are very important later on. So this is why I recommend you this functionality of restarting the game. If you have internet connection difficulties, you can set the game to low quality, and then the movie is loaded in a somewhat smaller pixel size. You can also switch on and off subtitles, and outside on the mainframe, you can set your subtitle language: English, Hungarian, Russian, and Georgian. The game consists, this is the second button here, of 23 scenes. And when you are progressing, you will discover that the scenes get shorter and shorter and more engaging. So most people who have reached scene number 10, they say, oh, after this scene, I felt that I was sucked into the game, I couldn't stop, and I was really engaged. So when you are at scene number 10, 2 things will happen. You have played typically 50% of the typical time, because then afterwards the scene becomes shorter in time to play. And second, this is the far more enjoyable part of the game. Then in the game, you can switch on and off here the flow radar, as I mentioned to you. And who was the guy in apathy? We were curious on how Alex is, and you can see he's here. And during the game, it will be tracked, like in an aeroplane, how they fly on a radar, where they currently are. So after each major decisions, this will flash, and it shows that there's something has been recalculated, and people are now at some other position. The group atmosphere and the financial tracking of the game you can see here. Now the library is hidden here. Open the media library. I open that now. And in the media library, you have topics of management, psychology, of positive psychology and flow. You can switch these filters on and off, and winemaking. If you're not an expert in wine drinking is not good enough, but winemaking, then you can and should read also about the technology here. There are some movies and some readings here. And the personal profiles, which I've shown to you, mentioned here, are here. And you see it's empty because you have not made job interviews with these people yet. So we go back to the game. And with this, the game starts. And then there are scenes which are running down. You should watch. You can go to the Tudor Winery website. Mr. Fligby will give you some advices occasionally. He's often saying the opposite of what you did, because that's also true. He gives you good advice. He gives you mentoring tips. He's a game master, a troublemaker, and a coach. And whenever you feel enough, you have played half an hour, 1 hour, I don't know how much, you want to continue later on. Here is, unfortunately, a little bit small, the exit button, exit the game. So here you save the game, and then you can exit the game like this. I will do that now. Once the game is finished, we will talk about next week in 2 groups about your game experiences. I ask you to collect ideas how you played the game, how you enjoyed it, what were the difficult questions you had, which you would like to discuss with the others because you were in doubt. We will also discuss a little bit already your management results, your reports. I will tell you who's the winner of the game, who was the best in finance and flow, and so on, because you have a function here. It is called in the Mine Results tab. This is where you will see all your individual results, and next week I will see also the group averages. I will show you how you have done compared to all the others. You can make excursions to posts on Facebook, on Fligby, but also a web page which we're updating. And if you have contributions to this, as I mentioned at the beginning of the course, you can write your great contributions, and we can publish it if it is relevant to hear also. Okay, let me briefly check if questions have arrived. Do you have any questions? You can also switch on the voice and ask me with voices if you have a question related to Fligby and the game process. Okay, Peter?
So I'm thinking a little bit in general about flow and
Yes.
how it relates to interest in different topics.
You do several things until the next session. Amongst these several, one is that you have completed the game before the next session, next Monday evening or afternoon, I've said, because I have to do some statistical analysis on the game group results. The other type of activities you have to do is your blog. I have put into the blog questions related to the people, the characters. Some of them you have to reply after scene number 1, like who's your favorite character in the first impression. Then you have to answer a few questions after scene 8 or 10. So a few scenes you have already played, you're in the company, you're in the story, and I will ask you mostly questions like what are the most difficult management questions. But there are also questions related after the game, scene 23, the défilé, you have seen who made the movie, and then you think back, retrospectively, the first question, the problem I had, were actually not that relevant by the end of the story, and now this is the difficulty I am managing, or this is what I've experienced. So the second task is to do the blogging, not just the game completion. And the third that dimension you should please keep in mind is your group work, your skills reports, and also getting maybe a chat with the person who's going to be your coach or your coachee, because the idea here is that you start to get attuned to your customer, to your client, about the leadership challenges they had. And I will also ask you later to share, if you wish, with each other the blog comments you made, so that you can actually share your leadership questions for the coach. Okay. So coming back here, let me check my memo for you. I have mentioned to you the media library. I have not mentioned to you that in scene number 3, you will have an interviewing with your employees, your colleagues, your team. And just to mention it to you, there were 2 time sections, and one is somewhat hidden. So you have an afternoon and a morning to advocate the interviews. But it's the question whom you want to speak to at all, whom you will speak longer. And one interview unit, I think it's 10 minutes is one question, but it's described within the game. So you will be able to ask more questions to people whom you allocate more time to. I have mentioned all the other points. I have also mentioned to you that this is now the time for you to be yourself. Don't try to think constantly of, what would be the ideal, better ego. Just be yourself and playing out the game as you would normally do it if this would go live. Because later, next week after the first round, you will be asked to replay again, and there you can make experiments and try to find out how the results would be if you're a different person. Now, I like this sketch here. The doctor tells the patient to relax a bit less, not to drink so much wine and smoke. Why I say this is I think and I hope this time will be hopefully a little bit stressful for you now in terms of activities compared to the previous sessions. But I have decided to keep the schedule for this course that we finish as we had initially planned it. I have received 1 or 2 comments by you, some of you, that this is a good idea. And since nobody else said that this is impossible, therefore, I think this phase, the next 2 weeks are going to be a little bit more intensive because of the gameplay and the blogging. But at the same time, we're clearing out this course from your schedule, and it will be hopefully also be more fruitful because it's more focused on it. So like parking this car, you have to park the first game by the end of within a week, so before